Good day, great people of God. This is Division 2 of Lesson 5 of our CAC Sunday School lessons for this season. Our topic is Jacob's sons and how they fare in grace. In Division 1 last session, we discussed about the first four sons of Jacob, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, and how these ones allowed their emotions and indulgences to control them. In Division 2 today, we shall discuss about the wise, godly Joseph. And we will discuss this under two sections. A, meets himself in Egypt, and B, makes God known in Egypt. So section A, meets himself in Egypt. So let's talk about the person of Joseph. Joseph was the first son of Rachel. He was the 11th son of Jacob, and he was born when Jacob was old. Jacob loved Joseph more than his brothers, and this made his brothers hate him. Joseph would expose his brothers' bad deeds by bringing reports about them to his father. This definitely would have made his brothers hate him more. And then Joseph was a dreamer. He had two dreams that implied that his brothers may be subject to him in future. This even infuriated his brothers more when he relayed the dreams to them. You may read about these dreams in Genesis chapter 37 from verse 5 to 11. His brother began to plan against him. They plotted to kill him, but later they changed their minds. They instead sell him as a slave to some traveling merchants. They take a report back to their father that Joseph has been killed by a wild animal. The merchants eventually sell Joseph to a top official in Egypt. So here's Joseph, far away from home, away from the love and care of his father, everything that he was familiar with. His journey to Egypt is sure not what he had wished for, nor was it ever a part of his life plan. Whatever his situation is here in Egypt is definitely worse than home. He's no longer a loved son, but a slave in a foreign land. God had shown Joseph in his dreams what would happen in the future. He was going to rule. People were going to bow to him, not just his family. The dream was beyond that. But the revelations never mentioned that Joseph was going to be a slave at any point in time. As we have learned from previous lessons, God's grace does not make life a bed of roses for us. The challenges will come, but grace will help us overcome them. So Joseph could have been killed by his brothers, but God stopped that from happening. God's purpose for Joseph has to be fulfilled. Instead of death, he's sold as a slave. God is ordering the steps of Joseph to fulfill what he has planned for him. His steps are sure not going to be through a well-paved road. The road ahead would have to be a rough one. Section B, makes God known in Egypt. Now Joseph finds himself in Egypt as a slave in Potiphar's house. He can decide to hate his situation for the rest of his life. He can decide to become wayward, believing God has disappointed him. He can also decide to make the best of his situation. But Joseph does not blame God for his seeming predicament. He trusts God, and it becomes so evident that God is with him that his master puts him in charge of everything that he has. It is not only his master who admires him now. His master's wife also admires Joseph for his looks. Joseph was handsome. She tries to lure him into bed with her, but Joseph is determined to keep his reverence for God. He makes it known that his allegiance is to God, and he will not do anything to offend his God. He will not allow his fleshly desires to take over him, like the case of his four elder brothers. He puts his passion under God's control. So how do you fare as a person in the face of temptations? Do you trust God for help, or do you yield to your desires? So now let's go back to Joseph. Joseph is framed by his master's wife because of his refusal to sleep with her, and he finds himself in prison. Is Joseph's situation not becoming worse because of his faith in God? From son, he becomes servant, and now from servant, he becomes a prisoner. Will that dream of becoming a ruler ever come to pass? Joseph keeps his countenance and keeps his character. In prison, it becomes evident that God is with him. Again, he is chosen to be a leader there in prison. He is loved. Because of God's work through the hands of Joseph in the life of one of the prisoners who is later released, Joseph's status suddenly transforms from prisoner to ruler. God can take anyone from obscurity into limelight. It is his work of grace. So what situation are you going through? Do you keep comparing yourself with others who seem to be better than you are, instead of trusting in the grace of God to fulfill his purpose in you? Learn from Joseph. respond positively to the grace of God, and see God do wonders in your life. You can read the story of Joseph in Genesis chapters 37, 39, 40, and 41. Our lesson summary. The path through which grace takes you may not be a bed of roses, but when you walk in God's grace, He eventually brings you from the lowliest of places to the fulfillment of His purpose. So trust in His grace. May His grace keep you through every situation of life in Jesus' name. So we've come to the end of lesson 5. If you have any contributions and even questions, please feel free to use the comment section below the video. May the Lord see us through till the coming week as we prepare for lesson 6. God bless you.